Taking my inspiration from the old Reese's peanut butter cup commercials, I'm going to take two unrelated BookTube events and mix them together. Weird tales and train stories. Will they taste great together? Hello, welcome to my channel. Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and last week I took two unrelated BookTube events and mixed them together. That was Week of the Weird, hosted by Jason White and Crystal at Fiber Artsy. And into that mix, I threw in March on the Rails, which is hosted by Alan at Alan Reads, Andria at Infinite Text, Debs at Rainier Read Stuff, and Greg at Ghost Readers in the Sky. Now, Week of the Weird is intended to read weird short stories, and March on the Rails is intended for people to read stories about trains. So I decided, let's mix these two together to make the Weird on the Rails event. Two different events. Let's see how well they work together. And I went out and tried to find a number of weird short stories, spooky stories, horror stories set on trains. Not that easy. I was led down a few false paths, but I will only talk about the true paths, that these weird stories that do take place on trains or rails of some sort. And the first story that I read is perhaps one of the most famous ghost stories about trains. That is The Signalman by Charles Dickens, originally published in 1866. It is about 18 pages long. This is about premonition, fatalism, and mechanized doom. Still one of the most psychologically effective rail horror stories ever written. And this, in essence, is about a British man who encounters a signalman working at night. The signalmen, as far as I can tell, were signaling trains at night, whether there's danger or not. And this signalman was talking to this British man about a railway accident and how he saw an image, what he thought was a ghost, before this railway crash. And what happens is that he cannot do anything because he sees this image again, and he cannot report it as danger because everyone would say, if you're seeing ghosts, you're mad. But when he sees ghosts, trains have accidents. This is really a rather wonderful little story about ghosts and trains from the very famous Charles Dickens. The Witch by Shirley Jackson, originally published 1944. It's about 6 pages long. This is more psychological unease rather than overt horror. Jackson turns a mundane train ride into destabilization and subtle dread. This is the story of a mother and her child taking an ordinary train ride. The child is young, and he is imagining witches outside the train as they go by. And then someone else steps into the train room where they're sitting. And this person may be a little disturbed, a little uneasy in the mind. And the boy starts talking about witches. And does he see the witches? Well, if you're on a train, you never know who might be sitting next to you. What is going on in this person's mind? Again, not overt horror, but very uneasy in its tone and feeling, and gives you something to think about. If you're ever on that train, who is sitting next to you? Far Below by Barbour Johnson, originally published 1939, about 10 pages long. Let me read you the brief little introduction to this story. Before I do that, this has wonderful little illustrations in this copy. While some people might think it is impossible to make New York subway system scarier than it is, Robert Barbour Johnson proved capable of the task and far below. So capable, in fact, that 14 years after it appeared in the June-July issue for 1939, Dorothy McClath named Far Below the best short story ever published in Weird Tales. On one hand, the story is a modern tale of horror in which part of everyday urban life is invested with terrifying possibilities. On the other hand, it is a direct reference to H.P. Lovecraft, can be read as a tribute to the old spirit of the magazine. And the tribute to H.P. Lovecraft is his short story, Hickman's Model. And in this New York City, there is something in the New York City subway system that is kept secret from the people because it is rather dangerous. It is told from a man who has been in a job for 10, 15 years, maybe 20 years, protecting New York City from the things that lurk far below. But what happens to someone who works with horrors on a daily basis, protecting people? Can that affect you? I have to agree that this is one magnificent horror story. I really know nothing about Robert Barbour Johnson, but looking him up, I discovered that he was an American artist and writer of weird fiction from 1907 to 1987, and H.P. Lovecraft allegedly admired his stories a lot. And one of the interesting things is that Barbour's father worked in the New York City subways himself. So maybe the author had a little bit of insight to what might be lurking in the subways of New York City. The Midnight Meat Train by Clive Barker, originally published in 1984. It is 35 pages long. I have to admit that this is probably my favorite Clive Barker short stories. It is the story of Kaufman, who was moved from Atlanta to New York City about 3.5 months ago because he always thought he would admire and love the city of New York. And he's living there. He's working his job. But there is the reports of the subway slaughterer. People on subway trains are getting slaughtered rather heinously, and it has become quite a scandal. But one night, Kaufman is working late. He is trying to do his job, and it is after 10 o'clock. And he finally throws in the towel and says, I'm going home. And he boards the subway, trying to go home. But things happen on this subway station. He falls asleep because he is so tired. And then he notices that some of the people who were riding with him when he fell asleep, they're gone. And then he finds their bodies hanging up from the top of the subway ceiling. Someone has butchered them like meat on a rack. Well, I will leave the story there because Kaufman has to do something. He's on this train late at night with the subway butcherer. And in between this, you do get bits of the subway butcher's own story. He's a man named Mahogany. He is about 50 years old. He considers it his job, his destiny, to butcher people on this train for some reason. And to find out what that reason is, go read this story. It is full of urban horror, body horror. It is absolutely one, as I said, one of the best horror stories of the 20th century that I've read. And again, I think it is my favorite Clive Barker short story. So if you have not read The Midnight Meat Train, and you can take some gruesome short stories, read this. The story set on the New York City subway. And yes, I have 2 stories set on the New York City subway for this week because there is something about New York City that just draws me in. There is some sort of innate horror lurking in that city under its urban environment. I really need to read more. I'm not sure if there are going to be more horror stories set on the New York City subway, but I think there probably are. Okay, that's all I could do for Weird on the Rails. I'm going to be on the lookout for more ghost stories, more horror stories set on trains, because hopefully I can do this event again next year. I think it was a lot of fun mixing these two unrelated events because you can take one event that, like trains, perfectly normal, and mix it with the weird. I will probably, in the next weeks of March, try to find some ordinary crime and mystery stories set on trains because it's a fascinating way to look at things. Find two different events, two different modes of thought, and mix them together. And they come out well. I think the weird and the trains tasted very well together. Thank you for watching and keep on reading.